Tēnā koutou, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, Creating a Resilient Low Carbon Tomorrow. I'm joined today by Nick Newman and Steph Kalabusk from Bay Plenty Regional Council and Tauranga City Council, respectively. In honour of Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, we just wanted to kick off the session with a little karakia, which was very helpfully provided by the amazing app that TCC has just launched. Tau aki rā te moana nei, e papaki ko ana ki te ako tangata. Ka kinga waka, ka mauri te tohu, ki te arearenga o Mauao. He pou he ringa mau, he pou hononga mau. Kia harea ki te tika, kia harea ki te pono. Kia mau, kia ita, kia humie, huie, taikie. And that translates to a settling peace upon the ocean that laps to the shores of the people. The canoe rises, turning to face Moao, a mooring for you to bind to, a connection for you, to bind to integrity, to bind to truth. Hold fast, relentless and steadfast. Together, we agree. Kicking us off today, we have Steph, who's just going to give us a little bit of an overview of Future Fit. So I'll hand over to you, Steph.
Thank you, Meg. Yes, and thank you to all of you who are joining us today for this webinar. It's really cool to be part of the first Climate Action Festival. I'm sure that this is only going to grow in the years ahead, and I'm sure everyone on this call cares a lot about climate action and recognizes what a global challenge it is. And with that, it's a global challenge that requires local action, and our three councils work together a lot on different initiatives to create a resilient low carbon tomorrow. And one of those is Future Fit. Some of you might have heard of Future Fit. It is an online tool that the Bay of Plenty councils came together to launch back in May, and it helps families determine their carbon footprint and set climate-friendly goals to reduce their impact on the planet. So just one way for our community to engage with climate change. Some of you might be familiar with the term carbon footprint. For some of you, it might be new, but effectively, it's just one way to measure our impact, the impact of our lifestyle on the planet. There are different ways to look at it, and carbon footprints are one of those ways. And it helps us understand a little bit better how our day-to-day choices create different, come along with different emissions. So how we travel, how we power our homes, what we eat, and what we buy, and helps us recognize that we can all be part of efforts that our region or countries have, the efforts that we're putting forward to reduce our emissions will come faster if we can all collectively contribute through lifestyle choices that have lower carbon impacts. So when you go to, I mentioned it was an online tool. So when you type futurefit.co.nz in your browser, you'll come to this landing page. And as you see, there's a Get Started button here at the bottom. So it takes you over to a 19-question questionnaire, which kicks off with just a few questions that helps, that helps them with the methodology of how they end up giving you your carbon footprint at the end. So they'll ask how many people live in your household, your yearly income, and which area you live in. Just to explain why those questions are being asked, the methodology uses a few different assumptions for the average profile of households in given regions. And because they're the methodology is around consumption-based emissions rather than production-based. They gathered a whole bunch of different stats from Household Economic Survey, Stats NZ, trends and how people shop, in regions like Auckland compared to Bay of Plenty, compared to Wellington, compared to Southland. So that's why they ask these questions. They're not, tracking your private information at all. And And if you do have any questions along the way about why they're asking certain questions, you can see the little information questions, or the question mark icons will give you more information. And if you do want to learn more about the methodology, they have a whole write-up on their website about it. There's also a 1-hour webinar that Auckland Council made that's hosted on YouTube that explains it. And my apologies, I forgot to mention earlier that FutureFit is a tool that was launched by Auckland Council as they're part of the C40 network. And Bay of Plenty is the first region to launch the tool outside of Tamaki. So as I mentioned, there are 19 questions. The questionnaire takes you through a few different questions around how you move, power, eat, and shop. So as you can see here, this is one example from the move categories, which gets into a bit more granular information on, how much time you might spend commuting through different methods. Other questions, and it does give you along the way a snapshot of your footprint average. So you're the column in the middle there where it says me, and then the column on the right compares you to the New Zealand average. The column the left is the New Zealand average and the right is the World OECD average. I'm sorry, I think one slide managed to skip, but that's all right. At the end of the questionnaire, it takes you to your personal dashboard when you sign up to FutureFit, and it'll show you under My Impact how much of your personal carbon footprint comes from the way you move, or the way you eat, the way you power, the way you shop. When you click on each section of that pie chart, it'll give you an added breakdown of where those emissions are coming from. And then up here, you can see that you can answer next level questions to get a more accurate carbon footprint. So as I mentioned, the methodology is based around a few assumptions. And if you want to get a little bit more detailed about how you live your day-to-day lifestyle, you're able to go a little bit deeper with those questions. And the really neat part of the FutureFit site is the section where they suggest some actions that are tailored for you based on how you answered the questionnaire. So this is, for me, what came up under power. You'll see that for each action, they show you what the associated carbon reductions will be, and then whether it's sort of a one-off activity or things that you can do on a weekly basis. And as I said, it's tailored to you. So if you say that you bike to work, it's not going to suggest, hey, you should try biking to work. And if you, already have a meat-free diet, they're not going to suggest trying out going meatless once a week. So the actions are quite neat. And then you can see also on the left-hand side that you can get involved in a few team challenges or set some goals. You can ask for reminders around your actions so that you can get a sense of how your carbon reductions sort of accumulate over time. And really, the takeaway here is that FutureFit wants us all to be part of climate solutions, and that they do make a difference. It might feel small when you just look at your own contributions, but then as an aggregate, once we all sort of participate in these different solutions, it comes together to make a really big difference. And not only does it reduce our impact on the planet, but a lot of these actions have the power to improve our everyday lives. Often what's good for Papatūānuku ends up being good for us, and there are a lot of health benefits to what's suggested as well. There are easier choices and harder choices for everyone, and that's something we want to acknowledge, that the easy actions aren't going to be, that are easy to you might not be easy for everyone. So trying out the bus might be pretty relatively simple for some people, but if you live in an area that's not serviced very well by the bus service, then obviously that's going to be a harder choice for you. So just acknowledging that everyone's entry point is going to be different. And lastly, there's a lot of great psychology research out there to show that when the people we're surrounded by change their habits, we're a lot more likely to change as well. And so the reverse is true. So if you adopt a few more climate-friendly habits, you're likely to influence those around you, and that will create a great ripple effect. The other thing that I just wanted to encourage through this slide is, although obviously we need a lot of big systemic change to tackle the problems that we're facing, not only in our regions, but or as a country or as a world, the power of local action and individual action, once we start being part of those solutions, finding community with others who are participating in those same solutions, it does really have the power to scale up from there into the systemic change that we want to see. It gives hope, it creates momentum. It means that we're part of the change that we want to see for a low carbon tomorrow. And on the left, some local headlines, and on the right, some international headlines about how the choices individuals make really can shift the dial in really big ways and set new norms for how systems respond and change over time. Just a few quick stats around what we were successful with when we launched the tool in the Bay of Plenty. There were a lot of different communication channels that we used to try to get the tool out there, and result that we can be pretty proud of is that the Bay of Plenty represented 40% of all Future Fit users across Aotearoa who completed the questionnaire in May. So considering the population of the Bay of Plenty compared to Auckland, that's a pretty massive success. And a lot of other regions across Aotearoa are looking at what we did here and hoping to do the same in their regions. We also launched the tool internally, so respectively at Bay of Plenty, Western Bay, and TCC. This is some of the feedback that we got from our TCC staff, just that, it was a helpful tool to learn a little bit about what actions were maybe available to them or to their families to reduce their impact on the planet. And before closing out this webinar, this is a tool that I used a lot in a previous workplace that I've found really helpful when thinking about Future Fit. Is really what we want to do is move people up the ladder of engagement. When it comes to climate action, there's not going to be just one thing that's going to make people change the dial from not participating to all of a sudden leading change in their communities, but maybe all of you are here observing what we're doing with Future Fit. So you might listen to a webinar and you might then go home and complete the questionnaire following along what we're doing here. If you think it's great, you might promote it in your programs. You might talk about it with a friend, a colleague, anyone else. And then all the way up to maybe you're super gung-ho and you're creating a Future Fit team and you're getting people on board. And obviously, the number of people who are up there leading at the top of the ladder of engagement is going to be a smaller number of people that maybe than those who follow or endorse what we're doing. But the more we can offer tools like Future Fit and do things in our communities like what Nick will speak to next, the more we hope to move residents up the ladder of engagement and do more and more when it comes to climate action. So our invitation to you is to join us in trying out Future Fit, spread the word, give it a go, and really each action we take for the planet counts and helps us create the resilient low carbon tomorrow we want to create for our communities. So that is all, and maybe I will save an invitation for any questions until the end of the webinar. Over to Nick.
Thanks, Stephanie. And just a reminder, I'm Nick Newman from the Climate Program at the Regional Council. I'm going to flip things up now and flip the coin and talk about adaptation in terms of what we can do in terms of living with a climate and making our region more resilient. And I'm going to do that with some examples of some work that's going on at different scales, at a regional and at a local scale. Go to your next slide, Stephanie. So the first thing, I guess, in creating that resilient future is thinking about how we understand the risks that we face, the climate risks for our region. Something that we've done is do a climate risk assessment for the region. So you'll see in the little blue circles there a bunch of different sectors, from biosecurity to ecosystems to water availability to transport to flood defences. This process we've undertaken is looking across all of those different domains and then trying to understand, have a common understanding of what climate risks we face as a region across all of those. This work's been completed now, and you'll see the URL down the bottom there to go to our regional risk assessment. And what the outputs of this this work has done is given us a summary for each of these sectors, which are in the blue, in terms of the risks they face over time, and also summaries then for each of the districts in the region. So we can look detailed into horticulture, or we could, for example, look at a summary for the Western Bay of Plenty. The purpose of this is so we've got an understanding, like a common understanding of the risks that we face, so then we're able to take action to be more resilient to those risks. If you want to jump to the next one, Stephanie. So this is an example of what the risk assessment looks like. So I've snipped a table out there around three waters infrastructure. And if you look down the side, you'll see there's coastal erosion and sea level rise and coastal flooding as two different climate hazards which impact on those three waters infrastructure. And then you can look across the top and you'll see three timescales: now, mid-century, and end of century. And then just above that again are two different climate scenarios. So if you're not familiar with these, the RCP 4.5, that's a middle of the road emissions scenario. So what that means is if the planet collectively, all the governments commit to all of the actions they've done, that will give us a moderate level of emissions reduction and therefore a moderate level of climate impact. And the 8.5 is if we carry on as a global community burning fossil fuels ad infinitum. And so that gives us a really high emissions scenario and gives us higher impacts or higher risks to the things we value. And then you go to the middle of the table, which is where the detail is, and you can see the different districts, the different coastal districts in our region, and you can see those risks have been rated there. So as an example, if we look in the Eastern Bay and sea level rise and coastal flooding, then there's extreme risks to those infrastructures when we go out to the end of the century under the high emissions scenario. And it's still a high risk, even under a moderate emission scenario, that middle of the road one. So this gives us a common language and lets us know where to look. So you look at the table and know where action is needed and across what time scale that action is needed. And the second piece I alluded to was about snapshots for each district. So this is an infographic, and there's more detail in the report, which kind of collates all that information that's in the meat and into the Western Bay of Plenty. So in the blue are the climate hazards, and you can see those little icons are represented around the district. And then in black are those things, those elements that become at risk. So just as a couple of examples, you can see there's a little horticulture symbol around Te Puke, and there are risks to horticulture through lack of frost days, for example, there. In Tauranga Harbour, there's the fish symbol for marine ecosystems, and increased temperature from climate change will pose a risk to those ecosystems that live in the harbour. And then if you jump over, Stephanie, one more, we'll see Tauranga City. Again, the blue, the climate hazards, and the black being those elements at risk, and different things at risk here. You can see flooding, inland flooding at Judea and the low-lying land around Judea, for example. And you can see some of the risks then to the offshore fisheries as well, as things like marine heat waves and increased sediment from extreme events makes its way into our marine environment. So that's the I guess the thinking about risks from a regional scale. The flip side is that local scale, and the second piece I want to talk about is about community adaptation planning. So one thing that we've done here at the Regional Council is we had a feeling there'd be communities who are ready to start their own adaptation planning. And so we've put funding aside in our LTP to support communities who are ready to do that. And this really is the grassroots communities standing up and saying, we're noticing changes, we want to do something about it. This picture here is from the Waihi Beach Surf Club. This is the first workshop that was held by the board of the surf club, who are noticing changes in their environment and they're starting adaptation planning. If you go to the next one, Stephanie. In terms of the detail around this community-led initiative that we've had, we've got $15,000 available per project for an identified community to do planning at their own scale. And so some of the things that have been used, that funding's been used for, some of those communities have got that technical support through that money. Some have run a bunch of community workshops with invited experts. Some have used it for planning support. There's a range of ways to cut this, but this is really the first steps, so as communities can take the first steps. And we've supported 7 projects across the region so far. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the very first project that we supported, that can be, I guess, congratulated for the work that they did and blaze the trail here, which was the Makatu Iwi Collective. They were the first project we supported. They've completed an adaptation plan with their community, which is pretty powerful. And if you search that up, you'll find it pretty easily. They've won 2 awards for the work they've done. They're really taking a proactive and positive approach to adapting to climate change in their community and turning it into an opportunity to bring the community together. And if you just want to go to the end, so I guess the key messages I'm leaving you with is when we're building resilience, it needs to be at a range of different scales. So that can be regional, it can be district, it can be very, very local. And it's really local solutions are needed. Adaptation is going to be very, very place-based. And so it's those place-based solutions that are the ones that'll be successful. And it's everybody being involved in this, not just looking to government, it's to people actually standing up and taking responsibility for their place in the future of that place. So that's me. I'll hand back over to Stephanie.
And over to Meg, I believe.
Yeah, I think I'm up next. So, hello again, everyone. I'm Meg Wakefield, Climate Change Program Lead at the Western Bay of Plenty District Council. And I'm here to talk to you about the most exciting part of all when it comes to having a say in what happens in your local community. If we can move on to the next slide. That is, of course, representation. So councils exist primarily to make decisions on behalf of their residents. And one of the ways that decisions are made are through elections, essentially. So they're the mechanism by which we all get to choose the people who represent us and what we want for the future of our community that we live in. Our elected members, or councillors, as we usually refer to them, serve as the link between their community and the operational side of a council. And they're there to make sure that the services that are being provided actually match their community's needs and aspirations. There's a number of different roles that you can be registered on when it comes to selecting someone to represent you. That's the general role, the Māori role, or the unpublished role. In local government, you can also choose to be on the ratepayer role. So that would be if you own property in one area, yet live in another. And of course, you can still take part from overseas. You just need to make sure you're registered with a valid postal address. But it is worth noting as well that not everyone who lives in our communities are eligible to select a representative. So all of our under 18s or newcomers to New Zealand, for example. So the other mechanism that we use when it comes to providing, getting everyone to give feedback on what's happening is consultations. The Local Government Act requires councils to consult the community before making certain decisions. There's a number of criteria, but the key ones, of course, are whether the decision is quite significant in terms of the financial or impacts on people's lives. When the views or preferences of the people likely to be affected by their decision are not well understood by the council, or if they're of a nature where an individual or even a group could have a fair bit of influence over the final decision. Consultation is not always undertaken. Sometimes there's budget, legal, timing constraints, and often you'll find that councils will have a previously stated position or an approach to issues that come up regularly. And they should have a policy or guidelines which determines when consultation needs to be undertaken that's based on the principles in the Local Government Act. So essentially the most important thing that you can do is to keep an eye on what consultations are open at any one time, and make submissions on the ones that are important to you. One thing I really wanted to highlight here is that you don't have to respond to every question in a consultation. I don't know is a perfectly valid answer and is actually still a really valuable source of information for councils. And of course, every submission, no matter how big or how small, who sent it in, is given the same respect and value. Move on to the next slide. So just a little bit of a plug for our upcoming consultations. There's the Smart Growth Strategy, which should be opening up to the public later this month. And then, and just a little bit of background on Smart Growth. Smart Growth is an urban growth partnership between central and local government and tangata whenua in the Western Bay of Plenty sub-region, so it's specific to this area. It will be setting the strategic direction and vision for the growth and development of the sub-region, and is going to be woven into the 2024-2027 long-term plan processes, along with some other key documents. In terms of what long-term plans are, these are documents that are produced every 3 years that outline the activities a council does, and how they're going to all fit together over a 10-year period. That includes why the council chose particular activities and the costs of those activities to the community. The long-term plans are a really important tool for councils because they provide a long-term focus, as well as being a tool for providing accountability to the actual community. Because as part of the planning process, we consider the feedback provided by the community during the consultation period. So there's a number of consultations upcoming on that front as well. So from November, Tauranga City Council will be consulting the public on their long-term plan, and Western Bay of Plenty District Council and Bay of Plenty Regional Council will be consulting on their upcoming long-term plans sometime next year. Key takeaways really is just that one of the most powerful things you can do when it comes to climate action is get involved. Lead by example. So taking part and then telling other people how they can take part and encouraging them to do so. Really, we just want to get everyone we can participating in local and regional decision making, because as Nick was pointing out earlier, 2 heads better than 1, and 50 heads is better again. Key takeaways overall for the session. Creating a resilient low carbon tomorrow can look like individual action. It really does add up, so do take the time to inform yourself and figure out what changes could work for you, your family, or your business even. Creating a resilient low carbon tomorrow could be collaborating with the people in your community. Collective action is going to be the key to getting the best outcomes for the future. And as Nick said, local problems need local solutions, and especially local experts. And lastly, creating a resilient low carbon tomorrow can mean having your say on the strategic direction of the places and spaces we live in by providing feedback to your local reps. The more people we can get participating at home and through local and regional level decision making, the better. So yeah, don't be afraid to tell everyone what you're doing or learning about. And that wraps us up. We have got a little bit of time for questions. So if anyone has anything that they haven't had a chance to enter into the chat, feel free to come forward. No questions? Mary, you look like you're burning to ask something. Well, in that case, I think we'll just close out the session. Thank you everyone for coming along today. Really appreciate the time that you've taken to come and listen to what we had to say. Last second little plug, there are a few other events still on this week, so do check out the webinar that's on tomorrow at lunchtime on your creating your sustainability message. And then of course we have the forum on Friday night at the University of Waikato, which will be a really great event. Highly encourage you to get along to that. And of course, checking out the local eateries who are doing some special sustainable meals throughout the week.
I will say something, Megan, if that's okay with you.
Yes, of course.
I think one of the things that's most important is the slides you've just had in front of us and the consultation that are going to go on in the next few months. It's a pretty busy and it's a big ask for a lot of people to actually pay attention to those and to contribute something that is of value to the discourse. But the main thing is that when you read them, you take note of what has been said during Climate Week and read those plans with that lens in mind, because these next lot of 10-year plans will actually put us on the pathway to doing some true carbon reduction work, and we simply have to do that. So I think that's a really important thing to get out to people, is how important this particular round of 10-year plans is, and of reading Smart Growth and seeing what you can contribute to that. So even if it's just a little group, if you get together and put something in that's at your level, at your basic community level, that's important.
I totally agree.
Thanks, Mary.
Ross?
Yes, good morning, or afternoon, I should say, and afternoon to Mary, who I've known for quite some time. But Nick, I was at the surf club when you were doing that thing with the surf club, and there's another session coming up. But it's become quite obvious that not only does the surf club have coastal hazards, it also has a dam above it, which impacted it, and it's become very evident in our stormwater discussion, the impact of stormwater in Waihi Beach particularly. But of course, we've also got the impact of likelihood of eventually sea level rise and the prospect of having a tsunami at some stage. So we're really looking at the impacts of climate change rather than the private consumption of. So we want some options, to be quite honest. If this happens, we've got A, B, or C options to, if we get flooded out, we can do this, or we have to raise a road, or whatever needs to be done to make our communities resilient from the effects of climate change.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's about what those options are. So those two things is about, there are lots, sometimes it's 2 or 3 hazards, it's not just one thing. It can be multiple climate hazards to consider, and then thinking about over time, what are your options over time? So it's not just going to be one simple thing. It's going to be thinking about a range of different options and how you might plug into those different options over different times when things happen. So that's the adaptive bit of the planning, is do this thing, and then when something happens, you can change to this piece or this options. You've actually got a range of options you can plug in and out over time as things evolve. So we don't actually know quite exactly how the future is going to pan out. We can model that, but we don't know exactly how it'll pan out. So you've got to be flexible and adaptive as well.
I seem to have missed out on the ring of things you displayed on the screen there at the beginning. I'd like to have a more in-depth, if you have got that, because that is very educational for our community board and people that are interested. Recently, Western Bay did a long-term survey, long-term plan survey and things, and Waihi Beach had huge numbers of people who are now interested in climate change and mitigation and adaptation. They weren't 5 years ago, but certainly they are now.
Yeah, we can make sure we get you that through Meg through the get that report, that full report, Ross, with all the detailed information in it.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Everyone.
I think that might be it. All right, we'll close off then. Again, thank you everyone for coming along. There will be a recording of this presentation made available via EnviroHub if you know anyone that missed out and wanted to have a watch. Oh, Sam, did you have...
I thought I should just drop in and say hi.
Oh.
Good to see you.
Yeah, awesome. Good to see you guys. Good work here going on.
Thanks very much. All
Sure.
right. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the rest of the Climate Action Festival, everyone.
Ka kite, thank you.
See ya.